Hey guys, it is time to do our Esther Bible study wrap up, and we're looking at chapter 6 through chapters 10. And we previously talked about and we looked at how Haman had put out a decree to have all the Jews killed, and he became so excited about his accomplishments because Esther and the king had invited him to a dinner, and he placed himself in this wonderful high pedestal, and he let his pride get in his way, and because he's got out there and he feels like he has the king right where he wants him. But where we're going to pick up now in chapter 6, we're going to learn that with all the excitement of the first dinner luncheon, King Artaxerxes is finding himself not able to sleep, and because he's finding himself not able to sleep, he has one of his servants come in and read to him the history of his rule. That's kind of prideful, but it's the reading of the history of his rule. And so in it, he finds out that Mordecai has caused him not to be killed because of the two guards that were at the gate that were planning and plotting for the king Artaxerxes' death. And so then he kind of wonders what has been done to honor Mordecai. And the servant comes back and goes, well, nothing has been done to honor Mordecai. And so the king basically turns to Haman, who's kind of like the right hand, and he asks Haman, what would you do to honor the person that the king loves and the king wants to honor? And of course, Haman in his wonderful pride feels like the king is wanting to do something for him. So I want to read Esther chapter 6. I'm going to read verses 8 through 9, because this is what Haman came up, obviously thinking it was going to be about him that's going to get honored. But this is what he came up as a wonderful reward. He said, have the servants bring a special robe the king himself has worn and a horse the king himself has ridden. Have the servants put the king's special mark on the horse's head. Then put one of the king's most important leaders in charge of the robe and the horse, and let the leaders put on the robe and let the leader put the robe on the man the king wants to honor. Then let him lead him on the horse through the city streets. As he leads him, let him announce, this is done for the man the king wants to honor. Wonderful plan. However, this is something that Haman himself finds himself having to do for Mordecai, his enemy. Wow, look at that. Look at how the tables can so quickly turn. So here is now Haman walking through the streets doing all these things. But then we still go back to the whole wonderful, it's day 2 of the luncheon. And so after all this is done, Queen Esther, has this luncheon in which the king is still asking her, what do you want? I'm willing to give you whatever you want. And so the queen makes her decree, chapter 7, verse 4, in which she asks for, it's for the lives of her people. And she asks this because, verse 4 says, I ask this because my people and I have been sold to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be wiped out completely. If we had just been sold as slaves, I would have kept quiet, because that would not be enough of a problem to bother the king. Wow, look at that. Being slaves wouldn't have been enough to bother the king, but being totally wiped out obviously was. So we go down, and so when the king figures out, like, what is this about, Esther lets him know that the man that is against me and my family is Haman. So this actually puts Haman in a really, really bad spot. Not to mention, there seems to be some befuffle at the dinner in which Haman really kind of finds himself over the queen, and the king sees it. And that leads Haman to be hung by the wonderful thing that he created. And we find that in verse 9 and 10. So one of the eunuchs who served the king was named Harbona. He said, a hanging post 75 feet tall has been built near Haman's house. Haman had it made so that he could hang Mordecai on it. Mordecai is the man who helped you when he told about the evil plans to kill you. Pause. Let's pause for a moment, because it's very important to pause for a moment, because here Haman has just done some crazy things. He thought he was just on top. He thought he was doing all the things that would just make him great in the kingdom. And for a while they did. But how about, I'm loving this, because here we're finding out that what the enemy meant for harm of Mordecai, God is using it to really put Haman under his own loose. Haman has come up with a wonderful plan to build this guillotine, to bring this hanging post that he thinks he's going to hang Mordecai on, and he's going to hang him. He's going to get hung himself on it. He had this wonderful plan on how the king should honor a person, and here Haman had to honor Mordecai with the very thing he thought was going to be used for him. So I just love how, when we think so much of ourselves, we want to be mindful of how those things can really come against us. So now we know that there's this decree that's throughout the whole kingdom. And of course, you can't undo any decree that the king has set. So the king has to place something else in place to usurp the fact that all the Jews in all the provinces would be killed. And so we go to chapter 8, verse 11. Chapter 8, verse 11 and 12, and we're going to see the king's command in the letters said this. So remember, another letter has to go out. The Jews in every city have the right to gather together to protect themselves. They have the right to ruin, kill, and completely destroy any army from any group who might attack them and their women and children. And the Jews have the right to take and destroy the property of their enemies. Look at that. Because the king couldn't undo his previous decree, he put another one in place that gave the Jews the right to protect themselves and to destroy and take the property of their enemies. But I want y'all to understand something, what wonderful integrity that really kind of exists here, because the reality is that the Jews never took any of the property of the people. They protected themselves, they came together, they bound, but they never took any of the property of the people. So I also want to note in here, I think in verse 17, that not only did Mordecai die, but all of, not only did Haman get hung on the guillotine, but also all of Haman's sons, I think there were like 10 of them, also died on that same guillotine. So basically Haman's family was wiped out. But there was something in 17. In 17 it says, wherever the king commands went, in every province, in every city, there was joy and gladness among the Jews. They were having parties and celebrating. Many of the common people from other groups became Jews. They did this because they were afraid of the Jews. Wow, look at this. A mass of people, the Jewish people were doomed to be destroyed because of Mordecai and Esther and their prayers. They are saved because of King Artaxerxes. He has to place another decree in. And I just love the fact that that there was a celebration, and that they came together and they worked together to do these things. And it shows a strength. It says in verse 9, verse 2, the Jews met together in their cities and all the provinces of King Artaxerxes so that they would be strong enough to attack the people who wanted to destroy them. No one was strong enough to stand against them. They were afraid of the Jews. There's something about being united, being corporately united when our people, that's it. It's 2 Chronicles 7:14. He goes, when my people who are called by my name would humble themselves, seek my face and pray. Here the Jewish people are standing together And God is doing a wonderful thing. And then remember that God is not mentioned in this book. However, he's all over this chapter. He's all in it. He's all over this chapter. And it's just so amazing. And so this celebration that they're doing, 9 going down to 31b, has a name that it's called Purim. And Purim is then something that would be celebrated forever. Like, so it's still going on. And it says, and so Mordecai and Esther, they wrote it up. They declared this is a 2-day festival. And I'm going to pick it up at 31b. And he told them then when to celebrate this new festival. Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had set out the command for the Jews to establish this 2-day festival for themselves and their descendants. They will remember this festival just as they remember the other festivals when they fast and cry about the bad things that had happened. Because what was happening was they were set to be killed. They were set to be destroyed. But yet by God's grace, by favor, by a king having a sleepless night, he realizes that Mordecai was one that should be celebrated and honored, and he honored him. And the Jewish people were still established, and they are still established as God's people, God's chosen people. But there's a wonderful thing that because of Jesus, we too are into that establishment as God's people. I know I'm recapping on Esther, but I need to help us as Christians understand that because of the death of the Jewish God, Jesus, we are united in that. And so there's just that little added thing. And you guys can stop me if I'm wrong. We might not celebrate Purim, but we celebrate a risen Savior. I hope you guys enjoyed this Bible study. 10 talks about how Mordecai was honored. He was so famous. He was above so many, and he was second in command to the king. I love how God elevates. You guys look at that. Think about how God can elevate you. You guys have a blessed day. Thank you for just doing this Bible study with us or with me. And I hope I'm recapping it good. If I'm not, leave some comments. I like comments. All right, you guys, be blessed. Good night.